Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Present and Awesome Summit. Welcome back. I'm so glad to have you here. My name is Elissa Weinzimmer. I am the founder of Voice Body Connection, and I've put together this summit all about presence and speaking your truth and all of the different amazing fields which people are coming from. So I'd like to introduce you to Kellie Wagner, who is here today. Kellie is an incredible human being. She is the founder of DEI Collective, which is a diversity, equity, and inclusion agency. So all about bringing more diversity to the workplace and making sure that workplaces are safe for all of us to have our full identities, to get to be our full selves. Kellie, you and I have had a little bit of a preview conversation before this, and I'm just so excited for the things you're going to talk about and share with us. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's my honor and my pleasure. My honor. So as we dive in, here's the first thing I want to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to do what you've done in the world, what you are doing in the world, and just a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. So I actually love telling my story because I think so many entrepreneurial stories that I've heard, or even career stories, were like, it felt like they were like, point A to point B to point C. And I really never had that experience. And it took me a long time to realize that actually it was an amazing thing and to embrace the journey. So now I'm now the founder of DEI Collective. Like you mentioned, we work with companies on, yes, like definitely increasing diversity and making sure that they're including all different types of perspective to drive innovation and business outcomes, and also just to create a richer culture. And then we really focus on helping them make sure that they're ready to really accept those people into the fold, and really be able to make sure that they're inclusive, safe environments. And the way that I got here was kind of, again, like a windy road. I studied journalism in undergrad, and then moved to New York City about 6.5 years ago for grad school to continue kind of this writing path, of getting my master's in nonfiction writing. And I've always been super passionate about, I think, diversity and inclusion, but I didn't really know how to put that name on it. I was like, I really want to tell stories that aren't being told, that aren't being surfaced, and where people whose voices aren't heard aren't getting those platforms. And I wanted to bring those stories to the surface, and thought I would do it through writing. And in kind of a roundabout way, I ended up getting into tech. So I worked a day job during grad school through a temp agency. Started out at a real estate finance firm, then moved over to tech, and kind of got really interested in operations, in how to optimize things and make things more efficient, but also dealing with the people side of things. And I really, really loved that. But one thing that kept popping up for me was that I was so often one of the only women in the room, certainly one of the only women of color in the room. And so while I loved the work that I was doing, I felt like a good portion of my energy was not being placed on that work. It was being placed on thinking about my identity, thinking about ways in which I didn't fit in, or that I couldn't bring my whole self to work. And I love this idea of presence, because really that's exactly what it was that I wasn't really able to be fully present in my work because I was so busy thinking about whether I was in a safe environment where I could be completely myself. And so I started doing some advocacy work within my organizations, joining diversity and inclusion councils, being a really vocal advocate for having the companies hire more people like me. But again, I was really splitting my energy, and I realized at the end of the day, what I loved doing was this advocacy work, more than the job that I was getting paid to do. I was like, I want to do this full time. And I felt that I was good at it. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I'm biracial. And so I've grown up learning how to navigate many different types of backgrounds and environments. And it really served me well in being able to have conversations with people where they really felt heard, and where I was able to communicate these ideas of the value of inclusion, the value of equity, and how diversity could really be a great thing in the workplace. And so I kind of just was like, you know what, you can't fight what you're meant to do. And went back to school, got a little bit more of a foundation around diversity and inclusion work, and then just took a really, really big leap, and it's been amazing.
That is so cool. And it's such a beautiful story. And, you know, hearing it again, because I've known you for a couple of years at this point through our female entrepreneurial network in New York called Dreamers and Doers. And hearing it again, I like your background is so diverse. It's so interesting, and it positions you so beautifully to be able to go into, I'm sure, lots of different workplaces and understand, even if you've not worked exactly, pardon me, in that industry, understand what probably is going on in terms of HR things, in terms of just how conversations are happening, how work's getting done, etc. Like the whole chapter of being a writer, that's so cool. It's amazing. And I'm sure you're still a writer.
Yeah, I think two of those things that you said were really true, which is like from the writer's background, my agency is very human first. You know, there's a lot of trends around data and the importance of data, and we certainly believe in that. But at the end of the day, those data points are made up of like real human beings who have hopes and dreams and, you know, insecurities, and they bring themselves to work every day and spend a good portion of their lives there. And so our agency is really focused on not forgetting what's behind that data. And I think that really is driven by my journalistic background and really wanting to tell stories. And then from the tech side, or just work side in general, I think it's been invaluable to have been on the other side of this equation, right? So when I go into companies, I've sat in their employees' seats. Like I've been there, I've experienced what it's like to be on the other end. And so for me, that's invaluable when I'm working with clients, to be able to remember and be empathetic to what, you know, their teams are going through.
I love it. And you're bridging beautifully into my next question, which is I'm asking everyone, all of the guests in the summit this week, to define presence, what it means to them. And I think to some degree, you're just already talking about it anyway. So what would be your definition of presence?
Yeah, I mean, tying back into the presence and identity, for me at least, presence has been about being able to bring my whole self to any situation. I think when we're focused in conversation with someone about trying to kind of hide and protect certain parts of ourselves because we don't really feel safe, it is hard to be fully present, right? Because we're having this whole other dialogue in the back of our heads about, do they like me? Do I fit in? Do I belong? And so for me, being present has really been about being able to kind of embrace all of me and bring that to the table in every interaction.
I'm so on board with your definition, and I love it, because part of what I've said for a long time in my business and my voice coaching is about speaking with your whole self, you know, like expressing from your whole being. And I find that, I think it's maybe just, you know, we could say maybe it's our parents' generation, or it's really been going on for a while, that people feel like, oh, I'm supposed to be my work self here, and I'm supposed to be my mother self here, and I'm supposed to be my sister self here, and like I'm supposed to segment, and of course then when we get into, you know, like ethnic or racial identity, or even like where we're from on the planet, like there's so many segments, so many different versions of us that we hold. And so I'm going to turn this into a question, because I want to know, how would you speak to like breaking down those barriers? Like what challenges have you seen people encounter, or do you encounter yourself in terms of being your whole self?
Yeah, I think it's a huge issue, you know, particularly in the workplace. Like you said, we're taught this from a small age, a really young age, that we, you know, there's the way to be professional in the workplace, and there's things that you talk about in certain situations and don't talk about in others, and don't share that about yourself because people may judge you. And I think it's so interesting because it's something that, you know, I was raised with those types of people saying those types of things to me. And I think that it comes from a really good place, right? It's like your parents, they don't want you to get hurt, right? They want you to feel accepted. And I think that it's been amazing to watch kind of this paradigm shift. You know, I've had the opportunity to be exposed to some pretty progressive workplaces, and to be able to see how people are able to use their experiences and use their identity to be more innovative, to come up with new ideas, and to really shine in their workplaces is incredible. But I do think that it really does take a sense of safety for people to let that guard down. And so when it comes to building that safety, it is really just about, I think, active listening, creating a space where there isn't judgment, right? Because if one person is being vulnerable, and I really actually think that this comes from leadership oftentimes in companies, is like when you see someone at the top, right? Someone who's leading the organization, who has authority, and they're being vulnerable, it does really set the tone for the rest of the organization. And it's why I always try to start out being vulnerable when I'm facilitating a workshop or talking to potential clients, right? I have to walk the walk too, and it really encourages others to do the same.
Makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to ask you to get more specific, because you have a window into this world that I think is so, so important, that this conversation and these changes are happening in the workplace and on the planet. And also, you know, a lot of us are not living in these progressive workspaces, don't have the privilege, we'll say, of, you know, getting to bring their whole selves into their workplace or wherever they're headed. So I guess, can you either speak to personal experiences that you've had, or stories that you can obviously keep relatively anonymous around clients, of where you've seen people step into their whole identities, step into their whole sense of presence, and something, you know, really pivotal has occurred? Or conversely, maybe you've seen times where people don't show up as their whole selves, and what limitations that creates.
Yeah. I mean, again, keeping it vulnerable, I'll tell about a very, I think, pivotal moment for me. And it really speaks to the importance of safety, right? Like, not just talking the talk, but really walking the walk. So, you know, a few years back, I was with an organization, and I had I've struggled with depression and anxiety since I was an early teenager. And, you know, most of the time I'm high achieving, I'm great, I'm like high functioning. And sometimes I have really hard days. And so I remember I went through a pretty hard period a few years back. And it wasn't affecting my work product, but I'm a normally like very bubbly person. And so people were like, wow, something's wrong. And, you know, my manager got involved, and our CEO got involved, and, you know, they didn't have the tools. They weren't equipped. They wanted to make it a place where everyone could be open, and I thought that I could share. And then, you know, it turned out to be not a safe space, right, where I could share. And I think that was really, it was really sad for me, right, because I had let down this wall. And so I think it can be scary to let down that wall. And in this case, I learned from it, and I'm grateful for that. And I think it was a learning experience for them as well, right? For the whole company, of like, what does it mean to actually embrace somebody through everything? And so that, you know, that was one example where it hurt, but it didn't discourage me, right? Because I thought, if I can go into the workplace and be honest about the things that I'm struggling with, like, that's the right place for me. And I'll continue to go to different jobs or do my own thing until I can find that. And in moments where I have found that, actually, I can say my last job before I left and started my own company, I was really, again, really honest. Sometimes I have anxiety. Sometimes I need to work from home because it's really hard for me to be in the workplace. And to my boss's credit in that situation, 100% walked the walk. And in giving me that space and in recognizing, you know what, like, you're having a hard week, work from home. The loyalty that I felt as an employee, the work that I wanted, the effort that I wanted to give, because I had found this place where I was like, I can be my whole self and they value me and appreciate me. I will be loyal to the end to that company. And I think that that's something that a lot of employees feel, right? Is when they feel taken care of and can bring their whole selves to work, their productivity skyrockets, their loyalty to the company skyrockets. And your employees are your best asset. So it's so important to take care of them and make them feel like, you value all of them, not just the good parts, but maybe the challenging parts as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Right before we press record, you and I were talking about AI and joking about, it's not joking, like robots and things are happening on the planet, right? We're all like, there's machine learning and so much, like, I'm just going to throw around buzzwords. But the point is, as computers, as artificial intelligence gets so smart, I think I start to become really aware of what makes us unique as human beings that machines can't recreate. And it's our compassion. It's our ability to create safety. Safety is such a huge theme. It's our ability to cultivate. We're not robots, right? We can't show up. It will not feel good for us. We've seen it in terms of epidemics of illness, et cetera, so on and so forth. We've seen how when we don't get to show up as our full selves, it doesn't make us happy or well, right?
Right. And I think people, you hear a lot about people, our generation, kind of like job hopping, comparatively to other generations. And in one sense, I do think that it is our expectations for our workplace are higher, right? Like, I don't think and I think this is an amazing thing, we're not willing as employees to just go in and clock it in and be like, this is my life. I guess I'm just gonna only, be happy with the money I make and then go on the weekends and live my full life. And I think that that's an amazing challenge that we're putting in front of employers in the workplace is, you can have all of me, right? Like, that takes more effort, but it also, the returns are so much better, right? Like, instead of me giving you 40% of myself, and it's not even the best parts of myself, I'm going to give you everything. But, I need to know that it's going to be embraced.
Totally. Okay, so then this is interesting because, this summit is very much geared towards people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, who want to build something, whether it's, building a writing career, whether it's building a company or whatever it is. So for those of us making spaces like this, being the leaders, forging the way, which you're one of them, I'm doing it too. How do we create workplaces that are diverse, that are inclusive? How do we walk the walk?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah. No, if I can solve that problem, I will be a very, very wealthy woman. No, but I think from the tips that I give are, one, start early. I see so many people think about diversity and inclusion as something that they'll tackle when they have more people, when they have more resources. And, that's something that I'm really passionate about with my company is working with earlier stage startups, right? Like, I don't want to work with the big companies because they, if they're just now thinking about it, they can still make impact. It's just so much harder, right? So thinking about it from early on, again, diversity begets diversity. So when you're thinking about building a diverse team, if the first people that you hire are more diverse and come from different backgrounds, they're going to attract other people, right, that come from different backgrounds, because people are going to see, oh, I see myself represented here, I could work here. And then from an inclusion standpoint, I think just looking at people as not one-dimensional, right? valuing their experiences and really making that connection, which I think people really struggle with, is making that connection between what is this person's life experience or collection of life experiences, what can that bring to the table for my organization, right? There's a great TED Talk called The Silver Spoon versus the Scrapper, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
And the woman in it talks a lot about, you have these two types of resumes, right? And the silver spoon is, and this is not to knock on the silver spoon, they come with amazing things themselves, but the silver spoon is like, oh, I went to, an Ivy League college, I got an internship, I got a really great job. It's a very like straight path, right? And the scrapper's resume maybe is like a little bit less, like they went to a state school, maybe they transferred schools, they had this go on, they were working part-time, so they didn't really do a full-time internship. So all of these things, and I think a lot of times we don't think to ask what that means, right? Like, what is that resume telling you? And so in that case, it may be, this person is really resilient. The reason that they worked part-time was because they didn't have the financial support from their parents, or in some cases they had to take care of their family, right? So now you have an employee who's amazingly resilient and amazingly loyal. And it's like, are you seeing those things when you're looking at something like a resume or when you're interviewing someone? There are amazing skills to be had from different life experiences. And so how do you tap into and find the value in all types of experiences that your employees or potential employees bring to the table?
I love it. That's inspiring to me to hear, for sure. And I want to loop it back around to the question of presence and say, so in what ways do you feel like presence is important in navigating a process like that? Or have you ever seen, I bet you have, when people aren't as present and how things go when that happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, it definitely, I can see the difference when companies are looking at diversity and inclusion work as kind of a check the box or like something that's start to finish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're treating it like that, they're not being fully present, right? Like they're saying, this is one more task in my day. And diversity and inclusion is something that you, like, especially inclusion, is something that you have to live, right? It has to be a value. It's something that shows up in every action, in the way that you greet your coworkers in the elevator, and in the systemic, right? Like in the way that you decide how people get paid. All of those things, they have to be like part of your entire day, right? And every aspect of your business. And so I think when you can tell when a leader is really coming with their full presence when they're thinking about this work, because they are looking at, how can I live this? They're not saying, what box do we need to check? They're saying, how can I bring this into my whole being and integrate it into the ways that I think and look at the world and treat everyone around me? And those leaders are the ones that are really successful at this work. I think when you have that check the box mentality, you kind of get the effort that you put into it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we put it in, some of the presence language that I use when I'm teaching my course or just teaching in general or thinking about it, it's, you cannot actually, you can't fake presence, basically. You have to literally show up and be present and truly take in what's coming from the outside world and give of yourself. And if you don't, if you're in that mode of just like, I'm trying to check a box, I'm trying to like just show up and appear as such, it's like the vibration of the energy of that is very different and people can feel it right away,
I loved in your in one of the modules. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about the content.
Yeah, we can talk about class. Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
I loved the kind of 3 circles of energy.
Yeah.
And so this idea of if you're like pushing all your energy out, or if you're keeping it in, being the 2 opposite ones, and then like in this middle of like giving and taking. And I think that that's so key to inclusion as well. Because, I think a lot of times people are like, I know everything, and they're pushing it out, right? Or they're like scared to talk about it, right? Like, I can't say that, I can't say the word Black, like I can't admit it. And they're keeping it very in, and aren't engaging because there's maybe like a fear or insecurity about getting it wrong. And so the exchanges that I see between people when they are really like living that idea of inclusion is being able to like give and take and share and learn and listen. And I think the listening is so key, right? When we're thinking about whether when we meet people, right? We're making a snap judgment of like, are they like me? Am I going to understand them? Am I going to get along? Are they going to accept me, right? Like, some of that is about you wanting to be accepted. But when you're able to actually like listen and get to know someone on a deeper level, and be a little bit vulnerable yourself and share parts of yourself, you end up finding out that like some of those surface things, right? Like race and gender and age, they actually are not as defining for you as what lays beneath the surface. And so you make connections with people that maybe on the surface you don't look like or think that you would relate, but when you're actually like listening and then being vulnerable yourself and really being present, you find that you have all of these experiences that really overlap, that really make up a big part of how you walk through the world. So
I love it. I love it. Okay, I want to give you some time here at the end to talk about like your hopes and dreams and plans, both for your career and the company that you've created, and also just, I mean, I'm already having so many feelings. The reason I wanted to have you on the summit is because I think that these conversations are the future, not only of our workplaces, but of our relationships, and, you know, just getting present with these things that we haven't had conversations as openly about for a long time. So what do you see coming in the future?
Wow. I mean, what I would love for the future is to be put out of business. Not yet, first time. Like,
yeah, fair enough.
Get super successful. No, I really, I think that we are shifting from a workplace culture perspective, and I really hope that we continue to make those shifts and really put real energy into this. For me, what I really hope for DEI Collective is to be able to tell the stories of people in the workplace and hear what it's like for different types of people. I think a lot of times certain voices get heard more often and their narratives rise to the top. And I think there's a lot of value in hearing what it's like, right? Like, we walk through the world and we only know our own experiences, and we don't often take the time to listen or really try to understand what it's like for our coworkers walking through the workplace each day. And so we're actually embarking on a listening tour to record interviews with people around the country to hear more about what their experiences are like in the workplace, so that we can start to build solutions that actually take into account what people actually feel like would move the needle for them in making them feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. So,
oh my gosh, that's a cool project. Will you please let us in this audience know when we can participate and hear about it?
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. That sounds so cool. And Lauren just commented too. She said, "Thank you, Kellie, for being so vulnerageous," which is vulnerable and courageous. Yes, I love it. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for saying that. I agree. Kellie, thank you for doing this very, very important work in the world in a way that is so present and so genuinely coming from your heart. That's clear to me. And I think we can all say we're here to support you and want to, see it succeed and grow. Actually, Lauren's asking a question. Let me chime in with this question. What do you recommend doing in the moment when you realize you've made a mistake when it comes to an identity that is different from your own? For example, misgendering someone. Obviously, we want to do as much as possible to make sure these flips don't happen, but when they do, how can we stay present with our own mistakes and move forward? Yes, Lauren, questions are amazing. That is such a good question, Kellie.
That is a great question, and I love it because it speaks to so much of like, Elissa, what you were talking about in your course, some of the tips, right? About like, we go into panic mode just in the same way that right before we step out on stage or talk to, get in front of an audience, we're like, oh, and it is the fight or flight, right? Yeah. Because I truly believe, like, most people, especially when they're engaging in conversations around these topics, really their intentions are so good, right? So I think, one, taking a deep breath and remembering that, you know, that you're not a bad person. I think we go into this place first that like, oh my gosh, I messed up. Like, I'm a terrible person. They're going to hate me. And then putting your feelings aside for a second, and just checking in with the other person, right? Like, that's one of those amazing moments to be an active listener and to say, you know, my intention was not bad, but I can see how this would impact you. And I just want to make sure you're okay, right? And apologize. And I think I always talk about it as ouch, oops. I think most people, honestly, it's as simple as like, oops. And it was like, ouch, like that hurt me, or vice versa, you know, whoever says it first, you know, that hurt me. And oops, you know, I'm so sorry. Like, my intention wasn't bad, but I can see the impact. And most people will keep it moving, to be honest.
Oh my God, I love ouch, oops so much. It's another version of saying what I would say as a voice and presence coach, which is both voices need to be heard, right? And so and yet I really love what you say. And I think this is a very important thing for us to realize about not centering our own feelings first before we check in with the other person, and going, because staying present involves staying with the other person. And it can be really easy in that fight or flight mode to retreat back into yourself and go, oh my God, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. It's all about me. Instead of going, I hurt you. Ouch, oops. Like you say, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really, really good. And Lauren says so too. Thank you so much, Kellie, for joining me for this summit. It's just an honor. I learned so much from you, and I learn so much from you every time we speak. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have been here, and thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation, so I'm glad we got to have it.
Me too. So for anyone who wants to tune in the future, actually our friend Danielle Kayembe is going to be on tonight at 8:30 p.m. She's also amazing.
She's amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. So we're having a conversation. Yeah, do it. Come back. So we're having a conversation about presence in your power tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And Danielle and I will be talking about like our power as a woman. So kind of, we've got a theme going today about, you know, identity and power. So thank you so much, Kellie. Thank you everyone for joining me, and see you in more Present and Awesome interviews. Bye.
Bye.